हेलो दोस्तों, दिस इज भारत कुमार एंड यू आर वाचिंग माय चैनल निर्मल इन्फो अपडेट्स।
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left.
In October 2018, the Narendra Modi government signed one of the biggest weapons deals in its tenure when it inked a contract to buy 5 S-400 air defense missile systems from Russia in a $5.43 billion contract. The S-400 is an integrated air defense system featuring radars, command and control equipment and 4 types of surface-to-air missiles. The 4 types of missiles used by the S-400 have ranges varying from 40 km to 400 km and can shoot down aircraft, drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles. The Indian Air Force has repeatedly referred to the S-400 as being a game-changer, along with its soon-to-arrive fleet of Rafale fighters. In addition to its potential as a cutting-edge weapon system, the S-400 has been at the center of international politics. In July 2019, the Donald Trump administration removed Turkey from participating in manufacturing and buying of the F-35 stealth fighter after Ankara refused to cancel a deal for the S-400. The US has also been warning India of sanctions if it took delivery of the S-400. Media reports even claimed the US could offer the F-35 stealth fighter to New Delhi as an incentive to junk the S-400 missile deal with Russia. It is this reputation for geopolitical intrigue that the S-400 carries that BJP MP Subramanian Swami is not happy about. On Friday, Swami tweeted a warning to the Narendra Modi government to not use the S-400 missile system in a conflict with China. Swami wrote, "The Nemo government would be well advised not to use S-400 in a possible battle with China. This is because S-400 is made with Chinese electronics. Russia is today a junior partner of China. China was the first export customer for the S-400, buying the missile system in 2014 and taking delivery of the first units in 2018. This is not the first time Swami has warned against the S-400 missile system. In December 2019, Swami warned the presence of Chinese electronics would make the missile system compromised in a war with Pakistan, in addition to the risk of US sanctions. Swami then tweeted, "Expect a deadly US sanctions blow early next year because of the S-400 purchase from Russia, which weapon has embedded China's electronics. S-400 is a fine weapon but compromised in a war with Pakistan. On a cost-benefit risk analysis, bad." It is yet unclear what Chinese electronics Swami was referring to. In 2018, Russian news agency TASS reported that the S-400 deal with China is without tech transfer or license production. However, Chinese companies have been supplying a range of commercial electronics for aerospace programs across the world. In 2012, a U.S. Senate subcommittee investigation found 1,800 cases of fake electronic parts being used in U.S. military aircraft, with nearly 70% of an estimated 1 million fake parts being traced to China. The aircraft on which such counterfeit electronic equipment was used included the C-130J transport aircraft and the P-8 maritime patrol aircraft, both of which have been sold to India by the US. In addition to posing risk of failure, such counterfeit equipment could potentially be used as means for implanting tracking and espionage systems. Amid the standoff and high tension across the line of actual control, prominent Indian strategic experts have explored possible options that India can pursue to send strong messages to Beijing. Law and Society Alliance and Defense Capital jointly organized a webinar on the topic Revisiting One China Policy, Economic and Political Options for India, Hong Kong, Tibet, Taiwan, and Xinjiang on Friday. The speakers at the event were President of Center for China Analyses and Strategy, George Franendic, Secretary General of Foreign for Integrated National Secretary, Sheshadri Kari, Director of Vivekananda International Foundation Dr. Arvind Gupta, Editor at Strat News Global and Bharat Shakti, Nitin Gokul, and Senior Fellow of Peace and Conflict Studies, Abhijit Mitra. Arvind Gupta began by defining the idea of one China policy and argued that it should mean that there should be reciprocity in all the areas between the two countries. He expressed his concerns about not taking a dynamic approach beyond the statements. On Tibet, he suggested that India should be supporting Tibet and try that the Dalai Lama should be given a higher position and more visibility in India's political circles. Along with this, India must begin economic and technological engagements with Taiwan, besides supporting it politically. He also recommended garnering India's support to the democratic movement in Hong Kong, even if Delhi is not part of joint statement by the West. He also talked about raising the issue of human rights violations in Xinjiang at global platforms. He also stressed the need to build India's own capacity on dealing with China and start anticipating steps that China could take in case India start deviating from one China policy. This needs to give an entire rethink on the entire policy on China, which needs to be modified. We also need to think whether we should go at once or gradually work towards it, he said. The arguments of Gokul revolved largely around Taiwan and Tibet. Exploring India's policy options on Taiwan, he said, Taiwan is the low-hanging fruit as far as a rethink on one China policy is concerned. We should think of increasing our economic and technological relations with Taiwan. They are wonderful in electronic chip manufacturing, semiconductors, 5G, etc. Taiwan is a master in these areas. India's trade with Taiwan has moved from $66 million to $6 billion in the past few years. 90 Taiwanese firms are operating in India. There is some direction towards our Taiwan policy, as we have recently set up a separate desk on Taiwan Invest organization within the Commerce Ministry. Also, in 2 instances, Indian MPs have attended the PMS inauguration ceremony in Taiwan. India is on the verge of a policy change towards one China policy towards Taiwan. The Straits Nation can help us train more and more students, government officials, technocrats, and teach them Mandarin to help Indian stakeholders study and understand China more. They say cometh the hour, cometh the man. I've no doubt the hour has arrived, but the man that comes to my mind is missing. Yet the more I think of 2 of the dominant crises confronting our country today, the more I reflect on what he might have had to say. It will probably take you by surprise when I name him. I'm pretty sure none of you have thought of him for a long while. But his views remain pertinent. The man was George Franendic. Let's start with the latest of the 2 crises, the confrontation with China and Sikkim and Ladakh. George, if I can so refer to him, had no illusions about China. In an interview he gave me in 1998 for the Hindustan Times television program In Focus, he referred to the country as our potential threat number 1. He had no doubt China was the greatest threat to India's security because it saw India not just as an economic rival but, more important, as an alternate example of how a third world country can rise to the top. And that's why he believed China is determined not to let India succeed. At the time, he was defense minister, but that did not deter George Franendic. It wasn't the view of his government either, but discretion was not part of his valor. He was outspoken and often called a spade a shovel, if necessary in public. In that interview, George spoke at length of the Chinese string of pearls surrounding India. From Gadwidar on the west to Coco Islands on the east, via a series of strategic locations in the Indian Ocean, George believed this necklace could become a noose. I'm not saying he was right, but recent developments suggest he might not have been wrong either. What I want to stress is his skepticism, if not distrust, of Beijing's intentions. He was wary of the Chinese. His sympathies lay with the country's opponents. So he embraced Tibetan students, several of whom lived in his compound. That began before he became defense minister, persisted right through the 6 years he held office, and continued long after. Let's now turn to the other crisis, the trauma we have inflicted on migrant workers and the seeming lack of concern from the government. It could never have happened had George been a minister today. Whatever the wrongs of his political thinking, and I won't deny there were a few, his was a voice that was rarely silent in the face of injustice. He spoke for the Sikhs in the 1980s and for the Kashmiris in the 1990s. It would have been no different when tens of millions of migrant workers trudged wearily home. Had he been alive, he would have been an old man. An age and illness had undeniably impaired his speech, yet he would have struggled to make his views known. Silence would not have been acceptable to him. Actually, why should I limit myself to China and the tragic migrants? George would have spoken out against the Citizenship Amendment Act, the treatment of Muslims by the police during the Delhi riots, and the deliberate silencing of student opinion in Jawaharlal Nehru University. I admit, by the time he joined the AB-Vipa government, he was no longer the rebel we knew in the 1960s and 70s, but he was not of the establishment either. He washed his own clothes. His house on Krishna Main Landmark had no gate nor any security, and when Ashraf Kesi, the Pakistan High Commissioner, was declared persona non grata in 2002, George invited him to dinner the night before his own government ordered him out of the country. George made his mistakes, I would never deny that, but there was a lot he said and did that was right. He had the courage to be different and stand by his opinions. We could do with a man like that today.
Yeah.